Hi, everybody. This last Monday, we didn't have school, and I'm sure you know it was because we were celebrating Martin Luther King Day. And to honor the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, I wanted to read a really special book. It is called My Brother Martin, A Sister Remembers, Growing Up with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this book is written by Christine King Farris with illustrations by Chris Sonipiet. Now, this book is a biography. And a biography is a nonfiction book that tells the story of a person's life. And this would be a real person, not a made-up person. That would be fiction. But like I said, this is nonfiction. So a biography tells the story of a person's life. And obviously, this is a biography about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And this book actually I think is very special because the author of this book is Dr. Martin Luther King's sister. Yeah, that's why it's called My Brother Martin. And it is written, like I said, by his sister, Christine King Farris. So, what I really enjoy about this book is it gives us a perspective of Martin Luther King's life that we normally don't hear about in school. Usually we hear about his work as a great civil rights activist, about the wonderful speech he gave, I Have a Dream. Those are all things he did as an adult. This book talks about his childhood, which I think is really interesting. And you're going to see in this story that, Dr. King's childhood growing up was not that different from some of us. He was a kid who sometimes got in trouble. He played jokes. He had fun with his siblings and his friends, just like you guys. So I'm going to read this story now. And just remember, this is told from the point of view of Dr. King's sister. So it's kind of interesting. So here we go. My Brother Martin. Oops. Just want to show you right here. Okay, we have a quote from Dr. King, and it says, I have a dream that one day little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. And that was from his very famous speech, I Have a Dream, which was delivered in 1963. So, My Brother Martin. All right, and actually this picture here, this is Christine King Farris, who is Dr. King's sister. Gather around and listen as I share childhood memories of my brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I am his older sister, and I've known him longer than anyone else. I knew him long before the speeches he gave, and the marches he led, and the prizes he won. I even knew him before he first dreamed the dream that would change the world. We were born in the same room, my brother Martin and I. I was an early baby, born sooner than expected. Mother dear and Daddy placed me in the chifforobe drawer that stood in the corner of their upstairs bedroom. I got a crib a few days afterward. A year and a half later, Martin spent his first night in that hand-me-down crib in the very same room. The house where we were born belonged to Mother Dear's parents, our grandparents, the Reverend and Mrs. A.D. Williams. We lived there with them and our Aunt Ida, our grandmother's sister. So Dr. King grew up in a house with a lot of family members. It wasn't just his mom and his dad and his brother and sister. It was also his grandparents and his great aunt as well. Maybe some of you have, many family members that live in your house together. And not long after my brother Martin, who we called ML because he and Daddy had the same name, our baby brother was born. His name was Alfred Daniel, but we called him A.D. after our grandfather. They called me Christine, and like 3 peas in one pod, we grew together. Our days and rooms were filled with adventure stories and tinker toys with dolls and Monopoly and Chinese checkers. And although Daddy, who was an important minister, and Mother Dear, who was known far and wide as a musician, often had work that took them away from home, Our grandmother was always there to take care of us. I remember days sitting at her feet as she and Aunt Ida filled us with grand memories of their childhood and read to us about all the wonderful places in the world. And of course, my brothers and I had each other. We three stuck together like the pages in a brand new book. And being normal young children, we were almost always up to something. Our best prank involved a fur piece that belonged to our grandmother. It looked almost alive, with its tiny feet and little head and gleaming glass eyes. So every once in a while, in the waning light of evening, we tie that fur piece to a stick, and hiding behind the hedge in front of our house, we would dangle it in front of unsuspecting passerby. Boy, you could hear the screams of fright all across the neighborhood. Now, like I said, we're going to learn things about Dr. King that we never would have normally thought about. Like, for example, he liked to play pranks when he was a kid, just like some of you, I'm sure. And I love this story because I will say my mom has one of these fur stoles that belonged to her grandmother. And as a child, I remember being kind of freaked out by this thing because it's basically like foxes with their eyes and their little feet and stuff. And back in the day, ladies would wear that as kind of like a dress up kind of thing to keep yourself warm. And now it's kind of gross, I think. But I think it's really funny that Martin Luther King and his brother and sister used to take that fur piece and dangle it outside of a bush when people would walk by to scare them. I think that is so, so funny. Then there was the time Mother Dear decided that her children should all learn to play piano. I didn't mind too much, but ML and AD preferred being outside to being stuck in with our piano teacher, Mr. Mann, who would wrap your knuckles with a ruler just for playing the wrong notes. Well, one morning, ML and AD decided to loosen the legs on the piano bench so we wouldn't have to practice. We didn't tell Mr. Mann, and when he sat down, crash, down he went. Again, guys, not something I would have expected from Dr. King, okay? We always think of him as this very serious person giving these speeches, but he played pranks on his piano teacher. Like I said, this is going to be something a little different than what we would normally expect about this person. But because we're hearing this from the point of view of his sister, we're getting stories that maybe we wouldn't normally get. But mostly, we were good, obedient children. And ML did learn to play a few songs on the piano. He even went off to sing with our mother a time or two. Given his love for singing and music, I'm sure he could have become as good a musician as our mother, had his life not called him down a different path. But that's just what life did. My brothers and I grew up a long time ago, back in a time when certain places in our country had unfair laws. That said, it was right to keep black people separate because our skin was darker and our ancestors had been captured in far-off Africa and brought to America as slaves. Atlanta, Georgia, the city in which we were growing up, had those laws. Because of those laws, my family rarely went to the picture shows or visited Grant Park with its famous cyclorama. In fact, to this very day, I don't recall ever seeing my father on a streetcar. Because of those laws and the indignity that went with them, Daddy preferred keeping ML, AD, and me close to home, where we'd be protected. We lived in a neighborhood in Atlanta that's now called Sweet Auburn. It was named for Auburn Avenue, the street that ran in front of our house. On our side of the street stood two-story frame houses, similar to the one we lived in. Across it crouched a line of one-story row houses and a store owned by a white family. When we were young, all the children along Auburn Avenue played together, even the two boys whose parents owned the store. And since our house was a favorite gathering place, those boys played with us in our backyard and ran with ML and AD to the firehouse on the corner where they watched the engines and the firemen. The thought of not playing with those kids because they were different, because they were white and we were black, never entered our minds. Well, one day, ML and AD went to get their playmates from across the street, just as they had done 100 times before. But they came home alone. The boys had told my brothers that they couldn't play together anymore because AD and ML were black. And that was it. Shortly afterward, the family sold the store and moved away. We never saw or heard from them again. Looking back, I realize it was only a matter of time before the generations of cruelty and injustice that Daddy and Mother Dear and Mama and Aunt Ida had been shielding us from finally broke through. But back then, it was a crushing blow that seemed to come out of nowhere. I mean, just look at those two boys, how sad they are. I mean, could you imagine? You have kids that live right down the street from you. You play with them every day. And then one day they say, sorry, we can't play with you anymore because your skin color is different from mine. That is very sad. Why do white people treat us so mean? ML asked Mother Dear afterward. And with me and ML and AD standing in front of her trying our best to understand, Mother Dear gave the reason behind it all. Her words explained the streetcars our family avoided and the whites-only sign that kept us off the elevator at City Hall. Her words told us why there were parks and museums that black people could not visit, and why some restaurants refused to serve us, and why hotels wouldn't give us rooms, and why theaters would only allow us to watch their movies from the balcony. But her words also gave us hope. She answered simply, because they just don't understand that everyone is the same. But someday it will be better. And my brother ML looked up into our mother's face and said the words I remember to this day. He said, Mother Dear, one day I'm gonna turn this world upside down. In the coming years, there would be other reminders of the cruel system called segregation that sought to keep black people down. But it was Daddy who showed ML and AD and me how to speak out against hatred and bigotry and stand up for what's right. Daddy was the minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and after losing our playmates when ML, AD, and I heard our father speak from his pulpit, his words held new meaning. And Daddy practiced what he preached. He always stood up for himself when confronted with hatred and bigotry, and each day he shared his encounters at the dinner table. When a shoe salesman told Daddy and ML he'd only serve them in the back of the store because they were black, Daddy took ML somewhere else to buy sneakers. Another time, a police officer pulled Daddy over and called him boy. Daddy pointed to ML sitting next to him in the car and said, "That is a boy. I am a man, and until you call me one, I will not listen to you." These stories were as nourishing as the food that was set before us. Years would pass, and many new lessons would be learned. There would be numerous speeches and marches and prizes, but my brother never forgot the example of our father, or the promise he made to our mother on the day his friends turned him away. And when he was much older, my brother ML dreamed a dream that turned the world upside down. And I just want to show you guys the picture at the end. You know, the idea that we could have people be friends, and it doesn't matter what your skin color is, it doesn't matter your background, any of that. All that matters is what's in your heart. And I think that's truly one of the messages that Dr. King was trying to show us. So this was My Brother Martin, A Sister Remembers, written by Christine King Ferris. And this was a biography of her brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I hope you enjoyed it, friends. I'll see you next week.